So I can pose 6 or 7 statements or questions, depending on how you want to take them. And if you answer them honestly, or you tell me you agree or disagree honestly, whatever, then it will be irrefutable. You'll have to denounce your atheism. Number one, are you an atheist?
Yeah, I'm an atheist, yeah.
Okay. So question number one, if the definitions remain unchanged, is it true that a triangle can never have 4 sides?
If the definitions remain unchanged, is it true that a triangle can never have 4 sides? It depends on the logic, but I'm going to say it can never have 4 sides, yeah.
Okay, so you agree with question number one. Question number two, I understand that there are hundreds of explanations for creation, but ultimately any and all explanations are going to reduce down to one of 3 possibilities. Possibility number 1, intelligent design, aka God. Possibility number 2, that something came from nothing. Possibility number 3, an eternal universe or creation. Do you agree or disagree that every worldview will ultimately reduce down to one of those 3 explanations?
No, that's not even trichotomous, by the way. We can talk about them.
Okay, so then what is the 4th option then?
Yeah, so there's actually a bunch of options. We can go over all of them. The first one is that the universe has a cause and it's not God. Right, that's option number 1. The second option is that the universe has a cause and it is God. That's option number 2. The third option is that the universe has no cause, right, insofar as it's eternal. The 4th option is that the universe has no cause and it began. The 5th option is that well, those are 4 options. I'm pretty sure you gave me
you just agreed with me, except you added a 4th option that doesn't make any sense.
Wait, which option doesn't make sense?
Okay, so if you're saying that
which option doesn't make sense?
If you say the universe exists, so let's go over this again. You're saying one possibility is intelligent design. Another possibility is that the universe was caused
or has no cause.
Design. Hold on. Then you're saying that another possibility is you're saying the universe has no cause, correct?
It has no cause and is eternal.
Okay, that was in one of the 3 examples that I gave, and then what was the third one that you gave?
So then it has to be the 4th one you're saying makes no sense, which is that the universe began and has no cause.
Began and isn't that the same thing as what I already posited?
What did you posit?
Right, I said that something came from nothing, so that's basically no cause. That's the no cause universe.
No, well, actually, it depends on the sense.
Would you like
if you're using nothing as a I'm not finished talking. If you're using nothing as a quantifier phrase or a noun phrase, if you're using nothing as a quantifier phrase, then yeah. But if it's a noun phrase, then no. Right? Obviously, there's distinct senses that we can talk about something.
When I say nothing, I'm talking about pure absolute nothing.
Well, that's not what's being said then. No, because we're not using it as a noun.
Well, I didn't think that I would have to specify pure absolute nothing because I thought.
Wait, but that's not what I'm saying then. Wait, but that's not what I'm saying then.
No, I'm talking about my 3 possibilities. So the 3 possibilities. Intelligent design, 1, something from nothing, meaning something came from pure absolute nothingness. That's possibility
then there is a 4th
number 2.
option.
Okay, great. And then the 3rd option that I gave was that the universe is timeless and eternal.
But there's a 4th option, though.
Okay, great. And you're positing a 4th option. What is the 4th option?
Yeah, so you seem to think that one of the options is something coming from nothing.
Just give me the option.
I'm not finished talking, sir. I'm not finished talking. Don't do this weird thing where you interrupt. I'm just going to turn you down and overtalk you. Right? Stop interrupting me. Now, to be very clear, you seem to think that something coming from nothing can only be used in the sense that there is a noun phrase, which is just absolute nothingness. For example, maybe Plato's nothingness, the total absence of properties whatsoever. There's a 4th option, which is just that there's nothing that it came from, right? Which is distinct in saying that it came from nothing. And if there's nothing
that's the same as option number 2. I already specified that.
No, because you can say there's nothing that it came from and it began.
There's nothing. Okay, again, so if I said my second option, the other second option, I said option number 1, intelligent design, option number 2, something from nothing, and then when I specified what something from nothing was, I'm talking about something from absolute nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I already specified that.
Do you know the distinction between a quantifier phrase and a noun phrase?
If you're talking about quantifier, you're talking about something that has a unit of measure or standard of measure.
No. When we talk about quantifier phrases in first order logic, we're just talking. Yo, can you mute your mic?
Yeah, so there's quantitative, qualitative,
anyways, I wasn't
temporal, and then there's substantive.
Yes, I wasn't done talking. So a quantifier phrase is just you can convey it as for all x, there's no x such that x caused the universe and the universe began. That's a distinct claim than saying there's a causal relation between absolute nothingness.
What does it mean to quantify?
Yeah, when we talk about a quantifier phrase, we're saying for all x.
No, I said what does it mean to quantify? Let's say like versus qualify.
And when we talk about quantifiers, obviously I just explained what a quantifier is. It's just saying that there is this type of category that we're talking about.
So there's a standard or a unit of measure, correct?
We're not talking about measurements.
How can you quantify something or qualify something? How can you quantify or qualify something, right? Because to qualify is to draw a comparison from this.
I don't
and
think
that.
that any of this is relevant. The point is just that there's a relevant distinction. Hold on, I'm not done talking, sir. Stop interrupting me. So the point is just that there's a relevant distinction.
Wait. To be fair, you interrupted him in his middle of the sentence.
Yeah, because none of it was relevant. The interruption was pointed.
So then, so that means that he should be able to interrupt you.
No,
No.
he has to give a reason for why the interruption is licensed.
Explain why the interruption was warranted.
Well, listen. First of all, you all were wrong when you made the statement about quantification. If you're going to quantify something, it has to be measurable.
Yo, Azrael, set this one back,
It
bro.
has to be measurable and observable.
What does it
That's what
mean to
quantification is.
quantify?
Wait, Tony the Tiger. Oh my God, Cap, just answer his clarity question.
Yeah,
Like for
so
the third
when we
time.
talk about quantifier, we're just saying we're in reference for some category of items.
Reference of some category, so then there's a standard or unit of measuring or this
No.
category, hence quantification, correct?
Again, this is exactly what I denied. But look,
If I
we're not going to
said
get anywhere.
one-
The
if
point
I said
here
you
in
are
the
5
dialectic
foot-
is just that.
If I said you are 5'8" and that guy's 5'10", is that a quantification?
It's a unit of measurement.
Okay, which means a standard, which means quantity, right?
Yeah, there's a quantity, there's numbers involved, yeah.
Okay, so the difference between, now if I said this guy is taller than that
But none of
guy,
this is relevant, and I
is
can
that a
explain why.
quantifying statement or is that a qualifying statement?
None of this is relevant, and I can explain why. The reason why none of this is relevant is just that my point here is just that
You could have just
there's a
answered the
relevant
question
distinction. So I'm
honestly,
going to
we
give
would
you,
have never went down this
I'm going to give you two
option of
propositions,
dialectic.
and I want you to let me know if there's a relevant distinction here.
Sir, again,
So I'm going to give you two propositions. I want you to let me know if there's a relevant
Again, we're
distinction.
only on question number
I'm
2
just going to turn my mic down.
of the
Wait. No. You gotta let Cap respond. You asked about what the quantity was.
Is there a relevant
Again,
distinction between
Great, so
the proposition
like,
for all x?
dude,
There is
yeah,
no x.
Bro, Tony, are you listening?
dude,
Tony, are you
I asked
listening?
my question.
He's
I
not
asked
listening.
He answered your question. You asked him what
No,
quantity
he
meant. He answered. Now he's giving a Now you're lying. Now you're lying. Now you're lying. Now you're lying. Now you're lying.
No,
Yo, Cap, plug in the device.
Yeah, well,
Great. So I asked him.
So he asked you. You asked him what quantity was, and he answered. I don't know why you're yelling. You're horrible at this, by the way. All right, bet you want to yell? All right, watch this.
Bro.
Watch this.
Okay, great.
You want to yell, right?
Right. Let's get one off.
So you asked Cap what quantity was. You asked Cap what quantity. You asked Cap what quantity was, and he answered your question. Don't worry. Don't worry. Keep yelling.
What a quantifier is. And
Keep yelling.
why is he trying to yell? Like, why? Who is
Drown him.
he's giving
Drown him.
I don't understand why he thinks he can get loud. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, and you're going to answer this question.
Great, oh, great.
Is there a relevant distinction
You're
between the
still on-
proposition
you still
for all
haven't
x, there's no
answered my
x, such that x costs the universe,
You still haven't
and
answered
there's
my
a causal relation between the universe and
haven't
nothing?
answered my
Is there a
question.
relevant distinction?
Sir,
Is there a relevant distinction?
again, what's a qualifier?
Is there a relevant distinction? I've already answered that, by the way.
What's a no,
I already answered that. Is there a relevant distinction?
I said this guy is taller than that.
Is
guy.
there a relevant distinction? Why are you dodging?
Or a qualifying
Why are you
statement?
dodging? Is there a relevant distinction? Yes or no?
Going once.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Going
yes
twice.
or no? Yes
I
or
haven't
no?
answered
Why are you
this
dodging?
question. Going 3 times. Okay, you're just.
I already answered your question.
You're not going to answer. Cool. No, you haven't.
I already answered. It's on recording how I already answered. So what I want you to
Great.
do is
it
actually.
a qualifying statement or a quantifying
I
statement?
already answered that as well, to be very clear.
Which one
now,
is it?
what I want you to do is actually answer my question.
Which one is it?
I'm not
What is
answering
it?
that. That's dismissed. What's the argument that it's
I know you're not
arithmetically
answering it. I know you're not answering
What's the
it.
argument
Thank
that
you
it's
for admitting
arithmetically
You're not
sound?
answering it. Thank you for.
What's the
not
argument that
answering.
it's? Oh yeah. Oh wait. If
Okay,
I'm not
great.
going to answer,
This is
you're not
only
gonna click on
question
that.
number 2, by the
Then
way.
what you're going to do is you're going to answer the question that I asked you. Is there a relevant distinction between the two
Four other
propositions?
questions to ask you just to even discount your atheism.
Is there a relevant distinction between the two propositions, sir?
Which propositions?
Yeah, maybe if you opened up your listening ears instead of yapping
Yeah,
all the time, you would
I'm
actually
waiting
understand the
for you
question.
to
I
answer
asked
my
you.
question.
I've been asking you the same question for the past 3
Again,
minutes.
right.
So I'm going to repeat
This
the question.
dialogue-
You're going to answer
this
the question,
dialogue
which
started
is which
because I
proposition?
simply
Is
asked
there a relevant distinction
to
between
answer
proposition
these
number
5
1?
or- excuse me,
There
6 or
is
7
no cause to the
statements,
universe.
right?
And proposition
Great.
number 2,
Great.
there's a
So,
cause to the
yeah,
universe
cool,
and
man.
it's nothing.
Cool, man.
Is there a relevant distinction?
Again, okay, you know what? So
Yes or no?
I can just explain this. Okay,
Yes or
so
no?
If this man would have
Yes or
answered
no?
the question,
Yes or no?
honestly,
Yes or
he
no?
would have
Yes or
found
no?
out
Stop dodging.
that
I'm going to
basically
force you
there
to
are
answer this
only 3
question.
explanations.
Right, I'm not going to move on to
Explanation
answer a
number
yes or
1,
no. Right, so is
Explanation
that a yes or
number
no?
2, something from nothing, and when I say
Is there a
nothing,
no to the, is that a no to the question?
or eternal universe. Those are the only 3 possibilities.
I'm sorry.
For
This is
every
kind of-
worldview is ultimately.
This is kind of like intense and cringy. Are you okay with this continuing? Like,
I mean, I don't think he's going to answer the questions honestly because I think he knows what I'm trying to run. What I'm trying to run is what's called Elliott's Argument. Elliott's Argument rests on about like 6 or 7 statements or questions, depending on how you posit them. You posit the statements, and essentially, if the person answers honestly, they have to denounce their atheism. The argument is irrefutable. He knows where it's going, which is why he doesn't want the question to be answered in good faith. So he's trying to stop it at its beginning. So, of the 3 possibilities, intelligent design, something from nothing, or eternal universe, right? There is no 4th option because then you'd break the laws of logic, which he already agreed to when he answered the first question. He agreed that the laws of logic are timeless and eternal when he answered that a triangle can never have 4 sides. Therefore, law of identity, law of excluded middle, and law of non-contradiction in that first answer. So answering that first question, he acknowledges logic, and what he is saying is now illogical by saying that there's some kind of fourth option which he can't quantify or qualify. Now, if he's trying to stipulate a quantifying statement, quantity, right? There are 4 states that we measure change or differences: quantity, quantification, qualification, substantive, and temporal, right? So that's why I asked him that question. So then next, if he would have answered that question in good faith, this would have led to the third statement and or question, which be, what is 3 minus 1? Then he answers that one. Then the fourth question would have been, okay, do you believe that absolute nothingness has any properties? If he would have answered that, if he would have agreed to the statement that absolute nothingness has no properties, right, that would have discounted the nothing universe. So I'll wait until the next round to finish up the rest of the question.
Yeah, so he's very confused, right? He's obviously, he has no clue what he's talking about. There are obviously 4 logically distinct possibilities. So the second question was, is it trichotomous? The answer is no, right? Something coming from nothing. If the universe began there, yes, it would have a cause. The cause would just be absolute nothingness, right? Which is just to say that the universe somehow arose from literally nothing, right? But that's distinct from the fourth option that I levied, which was that the universe began and has no cause, right? Because the universe will begin there, and it wouldn't have a cause at all, right? Because the universe actually began, but nothing caused that beginning. Now, he made the claim that, somehow denying this trichotomy and having the fourth option is going to be the type of thing which is logically impossible. I want the argument for that claim. I want him to give me the proposition in this direct negation and show the entailment relation. And I want him to actually answer the question of, is it the case that there's a relevant distinction? Which I just explained the relevant distinction, right? Which is just that the universe would have a cause in option 1, which is something coming from nothing. And the universe wouldn't have a cause in option number 4, which is beginning with no cause, right? This is just trivial, right? So what I want him to do is get the proposition in this direct negation and show the entailment relation, right? I also take it that nothing can mean different things insofar as it can be a quantifier phrase or a noun phrase. Obviously, even physicists use nothing to mean a physical state, such as, some type of quantum state. Those aren't the same thing. And then I also want him to motivate his conceptual scheme. I also want him to give me an answer as to why we should even adopt classical logic in this sense, right? Because obviously you can be a dialectist and just accept that contradictions are the type of things which obtain. Remember, my answer to the first question said it depends on the logic. Obviously, under paraconsistent logic, the type of thing that we're talking about here is going to be possible, right? Because it doesn't output as false, given that contradictions are the types of things which are allowed, given the system, right? So what I want him to do is respond to all of those burdens, right? And yeah, man, it's obviously not logically impossible. I want him to give me the contradiction and show the derivation relation. It's just trivially not trichotomous. He has no clue what he's talking about. And
Okay, there we go. Okay, so number 1, again, when he's talking about there could be multiple definitions to nothing, this is why I specified absolute nothingness. This is the little sleight of hand that atheists always put, so they can say that something came from nothing. But if we're talking about absolute nothing, and then you're also just denying cause and effect, well, then if you're denying causality, right, which the parameters of the cause must be sufficient for the effect. So the cause, whatever the properties the cause has must be sufficient for the effect, meaning the thing that has the cause has properties to imbue onto the effect. So if you're saying, right, that something came from nothing, and I specified absolute nothing, meaning something that has no properties, then you would have to admit by causality that it didn't have the properties to imbue into something. Right? So that right there, again, is just illogical. So if you're just going to subscribe to dialetheism, well, then you have the burden of proving, right, that somehow this contradiction is possible logically. And again, given that you subscribe to the laws of logic from the first question, right, that means they're timeless, eternal, and ever persistent, right? Well, then you're going to have to show how this is somehow logical, which I don't see how it is. Then, if we could have moved past that question, right, the next question would have been, after the 3 minus 1 question, right, and we got rid of the nothing universe, well, then the next question would be infinities, possible infinities versus complete infinities. A possible infinity can exist, which is just, let's say, something like pi, in which you just keep adding numbers. An actual or a complete infinity cannot exist materially. Therefore, the eternal universe can't exist, so that rules out number 2. So now that we have a worldview with two wrong answers, the contrary must necessarily be true, which means intelligent design, and that's where you would have to have conceded that God...
Yeah, so he's actually very stupid. If we look back on the burdens that I placed on him, and we ask ourselves, how many burdens did he actually respond to? It was a whopping 0. He didn't motivate his conceptual scheme. He didn't give me the proposition in its direct negation and show the entailment relation. He didn't adequately respond to paraconsistent logic. He didn't adequately respond to the fact that I can be a dialetheist. He didn't respond to the relevant distinction that I shared between option 1 and option 4. This is just horrible. He lost terribly. Also, I didn't commit myself to logic existing or being eternal and timeless when I answered the question of, can a triangle ever have 4 sides? Right? It's just trivially false under the logic that he's talking about, that this type of thing is going to be the type of thing which obtains. Right? But you can obviously adopt counter, logics, like paraconsistent logic, where contradictions are allowed relative towards the system, right? So no, I didn't commit myself to, somehow signing off on the laws of logic insofar as they exist. You can even be a classical logician and admit that they just don't exist, right? You can be like a conceptualist or a nominalist about the type of talk there, right? So now you have to motivate further burdens, which is just logical realism. You also have, no one said they're denying causality, right? Because you can hold to causal models, Tony, and have them be the type of things where, the principle of proportionate causality is denied, which is what you talked about, how, the cause has to be proportionate to its effect, right? Something cannot give what it doesn't have in this sense. We can just deny that as well. So can you motivate the Thomistic principle of proportionate causality? So yeah, I mean, you have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have like 9 burdens on the table right now, Tony, and you haven't fulfilled a single one in your response. You didn't adequately attack literally anything, right? This is embarrassing for you. You have no clue what it is you're talking about. You're getting blown out in the dialectic, Tony. So listen, man. I also want you to motivate correlationism, right? I also want you to motivate, the type of I guess you can say metaphysical realism in the sense, right? Because you're atheist, you're committing yourself to a mind-independent, discourse-independent world, whereas we don't have to, sign off on that, Tony. So that's about 2 more burdens on the table.
Okay, first of all, you're confused. You're massively confused. This is really bad for you, man. Because again, this conversation started because I said to answer the 6 or 7 questions and/or statements, of which you couldn't even get past question number 2, right? You posit that there's some kind of burden, and it's like, no, we're just responding to the answers that you gave, right? And again, you just kept saying nothing and agreeing that there was some, or positing that there's some kind of 4th option, which you weren't really necessarily able to stipulate because you were just reverting back to the nothing to something from nothing universe, which was one of the options. So again, if we're going to say, right, that you subscribe to something coming from nothing, and again, I specify that we're talking about absolute nothing, which has no properties, and then you subscribe to the law of causality, right, in which the parameters of the cause must be sufficient for its effect, right? Well, then you're going to have to somehow substantiate that the nothing, the pure absolute nothingness, has something to imbue. Now, again, if you're talking about that you have no burden to substantiate that, well, then there's nowhere the conversation can go. You're just essentially going to have to revert to solipsism, which means you're just going to have to regress to the confines of your own mind, in which case you can't even prove if you're having a conversation right now. Because again, you're essentially just going to say, how do I know that I'm having this conversation? In which case, I could just posit that, and I could just posit transcendentalism, essentially saying that it's a necessary precondition for you to even have the conversation, in which case the internal dialogue within yourself is sufficient evidence for your own internal logic, and then from there you can build that there are logical models external to yourself, in which case the observations that you're making about the universe and or reality can be posited, and then in which case logic is the foundation for connecting all those things. So again, given that those things can be inferred, right, all you got is regressing into some Cartesian demon or extreme solipsism or something like that, the regresses of your own mind, man. So this is really bad for you, man. You derailed the dialectic because I think you couldn't pass it.
Yo, Tony, so I want to be very clear. You didn't motivate any of the extra burdens that I stacked on top of you. You didn't motivate metaphysical realism. You didn't motivate the principle of proportionate causality. You didn't adequately motivate logical realism. Nobody committed themselves to solipsism. That whole tangent you just went on is literally irrelevant to the dialectic, right? Because nobody committed themselves to solipsism or any type of Cartesian skeptic scenario. So I have no clue why you're even talking about that, right? You said that, you just begged the question kind of, because you said that, there's no relevant distinction between option 1 and 4. I gave you the relevant distinction and you didn't respond to it, right? You just didn't respond. Now, to be very clear, you also didn't motivate correlationism, which I take it to just be the thesis that we only ever have access to the correlate between thought and being, so whatever we're talking about here is going to be interpreted downstream through our conceptual schemes, which is something that I also asked you to motivate, where you didn't motivate it, right? You're just losing terribly on every single point. There's not a single burden you have fulfilled, and you have about like 18 and counting. This is embarrassing for you. So you also didn't respond to the fact that you can be, a dialectic about the type of talk here. Just terrible for you. You're just losing. And you just begged the shit out of the question, right? In response to the relevant distinction that I gave, which is just that in option 1, which is something coming from nothing, the universe would have a cause. It would just be absolute nothingness. And in option 4, which is the universe having no cause, it just wouldn't have a cause, trivially speaking, right? So then there's a relevant distinction, right, between the 2 options, which is mutually exclusive, right? Now I'm going to give you an argument in favor of theism being necessarily false. If possibly there is no God, then God does not exist. Possibly there is no God, therefore God does not exist. Right? It's just a very simple argument, and you would have to show me the contradiction embedded within, the existence of a non-God, given that God is the type of being which is, necessary in this sense. So then he exists in all possible worlds, necessarily speaking. This is just trivially true, given classical theism. So I want you to respond to all of those burdens on the table, and respond to the argument that I just gave in favor.
Yeah, great. So again, if you're going to invoke some kind of paraconsistent logic, let's say, like, or paradoxical logic or something, in which you're positing that other universes or other realities and stuff like that can exist with different nominal-logics, and therefore, let's say, like, hypothetically, or it's possible for something to come from nothing, and say one of these worlds that it's possible that God doesn't exist. Therefore, God doesn't exist if it is possible, right? Well, then here's the thing. The problem with that is you get a couple of problems with paraconsistent logic or paradoxical logic, if that is indeed what you're trying to invoke here, right? When you talk about, let's say, some other possible universe, the question would be, does it subscribe to the same nomologics or rules of reality, right? Which would be like under our world, the kind of the logical axioms that the world or reality operates off of. If you're going to invoke some other world where it doesn't follow, right, any of that logic or anything like that, the same rules that we have, then we'd have no basis to even really evaluate and or judge this other world, right? Because then the question would arise, whose world is correct, or whose logic is correct, or whose nomologics are correct. So the whole point of you going on that tangent is completely just vacuous. There's no point in it. All you're doing is just building your own straw man and then trying to get us to focus on that because you want to focus on the actual dialectic which arose from the actual questions that were posed. You didn't want to answer them, which is why you're focused on the nothing universe and then going offshooting onto the dialectic into some sort of paraconsistent or paradoxical logic, right? So you can take us away from answering the rest of the questions because you don't want to face that burden, which is why you're under the delusion that I somehow have some kind of burden when all you had to do was answer 5 or 6 questions. So again, this is really bad for you, bro. And at this point, you're just rhetoricking, and I think everybody can see it, man. So, yeah, man. Ginkgo biloba. That's a nice word to say. I'm just going to say words now at this point.
Wait, he just completely mistracked the argument. No one was talking about nomological modality or saying that other universes exist, right? No one used paraconsistent logic to motivate the argument that I just gave. We're actually using a deductive formalization where we use classical logic in that argument. The argument is just as follows. If possibly there exists no God, then God doesn't exist, and then you affirm the antecedent, you follow modus ponens, is just classical logic, right? Which you seem to, claim to know a lot about, but then you just mistracked and said I was using paraconsistent logic. You're very stupid, Tony. Now, to be very clear, we're not using nomological modality, we're using metaphysical modality, which is just to say that is there a contradiction in the essence of the being in the world that we're talking about, right? And I take it that there just isn't a contradiction in the essence or the way reality would operate in a world where there's no God, right? So the burden would be on you to just show me there would be a contradiction, or else I'd take it that premise 2 of the argument is going to be the type of thing which holds, in which case God just necessarily doesn't exist. I also take it that any of the questions that you asked me in regards to your first argument aren't going to be the type of things that have any areothetic value. I deny the type of interrogative theory of argumentation that you want to operate under. I deny the Socratic method as well. So all 7 questions are going to now be dismissed, right? Unless you can explain to me how it has any type of areothetic inference, showing that the questions are ones for which are warranted in the dialectic, or you can give me some type of reason as to why we should accept the Socratic method of argumentation, which is something that you're using in the Elliott argument, because you take it that the argument is going to consist of a series of questions, right? You have about 20 burdens. This is embarrassing. You haven't met anything. I also deny that I have any type of burdens in the dialectic unless you can give me some type of argument in favor of the proposition that I have a burden, right? Because I take it that your burden from the onset of the dialectic was just to explain why the relevant distinction that I gave doesn't uphold, right? Which you haven't done. You haven't responded to the relevant distinction, which is just that in option 1, it would have a cause, and in option 4, it would have no cause, right? Like, this is just like very trivial stuff, right? And you're not even able to track very simple arguments. 3.
Very simple arguments. Again, you didn't answer the questions. And if you're talking about simple or me going into the paraconsistent logic of the pair, you mentioned that earlier. Now, if you're just saying you're just making a simple modus ponens, right? If possible, the universe exists without God. Then therefore no God, right? If you're just making I can just make a very simple counter argument. So then the question is, how do we resolve this, right? And we'd resolve this by abduction. And so the whole point of the argument, or the Elliott argument, or the asking the questions, is that it's essentially to rule out other options, and therefore, no other options being possible, the latter must be true, therefore intelligent design. So that's ultimately what the argument's leading towards, right? And we would have gotten there had you answered honestly. You didn't want to, so you're just a bad faith interlocutor. So there's no burden that I have, given that you were supposed to answer questions, right? Again, you decided to take the dialectic into some other offshoot, and I think that's because you didn't want to face the questions and answer them honestly, which just proves you to be a bad faith interlocutor, which, like, fine, if that's what you want to do. I don't understand how you thought this would go. I think this is just your intention from the get-go. So as far as placing burdens on me, I don't have any, right? This conversation started by me asking the questions. You didn't want to answer the questions, and then you made a bunch of inferences from the questions so that you can then posit your argument and then burden shift, right? So because you didn't want to face the question. So that's on you, buddy. It's really simple. It's really simple. So again, if you're going to make the argument that it's possible that God doesn't exist, well, I could just make a counter, or I can make the inverse argument, and then it's just going to be a stalemate. In which case, then we just have to resort to abduction, right? And it's really that simple. Abductively, we can make the case for God, ruling out other options, no other options being possible. Hence, your nothing universe being unable to do anything.
Yeah. So I deny abduction as even a theory of inference. Right, and this is just true given that underdetermination is endemic to abductive inference. right? For virtually any sufficiently complex evidential base, there can be multiple hypotheses that are going to be explanatorily adequate while being mutually incompatible, right? So then the question just becomes, how do you uniquely determine the underlying ontology, given that you have a permutation problem, right? So the whole talk about abduction there is going to be dismissed unless you can respond to the problem of underdetermination. Now, you said that I mentioned pure-consistent logic earlier. I did, but I didn't use it to motivate the argument that I just gave. Now, you said that you can have, this type of, counter-argument in response to, the type of argument that I gave in response to the, the modal talk, in response to the, existence of God. The question here is, I deny that you can even do that, given that you didn't even track the argument consistently the first time. So if you're not able to track the argument consistently the first time, where you talked about pure-consistent logic, how are you even going to be able to construct, this type of, counter-argument? So what you have to do now is actually give me the counter-argument, and then explain why it has such symmetry in regards to the content of the first argument, right? Secondly, you said that you have no burdens. I deny that, right? You've presupposed conceptual schemes. You've presupposed that there's a contradiction in response to, the trichotomy not being trichotomous. You presupposed that dialectism is necessarily false. You presupposed that there is a derivation relation such that you can have a contradiction. And you presupposed that the relevant distinction that I showed isn't actually a relevant distinction, right? In which case, all of those things are your burdens. You also presupposed the law of proportionate causality. And you also presuppose logical realism, right? So that's just a bunch of fucking burdens that you have yet to fulfill. You have yet to give me any type of supplementary argument for any of those things. I also take it that you beg the question, which is the type of thing which we should dismiss if we want a fruitful dialectic, right? So yeah, man, I mean, you're just losing terribly. You also didn't respond to the erotic talk or the talk about the Socratic theory of argumentation. I take it that the question...
Yeah, dude, again, like I said, when we talk about, let's say, we're talking about, let's say, me asking the questions and then me presupposing certain conceptual schemas and things like that. Well, indeed, like, so when you came up here and you started speaking, right, I presupposed when you started speaking that your words made sense and had form and structure to them. Therefore, I presumed, right, you likewise were speaking a language, and language is structured vocalization or communication or form, whether it's written or vocalized, right? But that's what language is. So then I was justified in making those presuppositions, right? And then again, that's when we can go into just transcendentalism, right? X is a necessary precondition for Y therefore X, right? So essentially, right, yes, I can make those presuppositions based on you just even coming up here and speaking words, right? That's a justified presupposition. So again, in the same way, though, if you're going to deny and just going to assert that I made all these presuppositions or I'm begging the question unjustifiably, well, no, those are just explanatory statements. Explanatory statements are often confused with begging the question why. Well, they both assert things, they both posit things, they both affirm things. What's the difference then? Well, the difference is that an explanatory statement is something that's already well stipulated, universal, or accepted. So if you're going to deny an explanatory statement or something that is just necessarily true, well, then the burden of proof is on you to prove a freaking miracle occurred. So again, you could either you could just say that I'm presupposing or begging the question, but then again, that's just going to put you into some kind of regress, which you're going to have to be reverted to the confines of your mind because you can't even be certain that you're having a conversation right now then, since you want to go that far. Since you want to go that far into me supposedly making presuppositions, yes, you spoke.
No one said the presuppositions on the table that I was asking you to motivate were actually substantive philosophical positions, right? No one told you to motivate that I'm speaking and having coherent sentences. I asked you to motivate your conceptual scheme, and I asked you to motivate logical realism, right, which is very controversial in the domain of logic, right? It's just a very controversial position, which is just that logic has independent onic status, right? So no, all the talk there about how you presuppose that I'm speaking is just irrelevant. You said that there's a series of questions here that's going to serve as an argument, right, insofar as this Elliott argument talk. I deny that, right? I deny the Socratic method. I deny any type of interrogative theory of argumentation where questions are able to serve as arguments, right? This has been in question because I talked about how I deny that the questions have erotetic value, right? So you didn't respond to any of that, right? I don't even take it that you've even rendered an argument so far. Also, I take it that there is no necessary precondition for the type of talk here in regards to this type of thing, because I take it that necessary preconditions are grounding relations where I don't accept grounding in the standard philosophical sense, at least in the way that Leibniz wants to use grounding or other people want to use grounding in this type of sense. So maybe you have an argument for that claim. And it seems like you have a lot of background presuppositions that you're unable to adequately fulfill. You talked about how there's a P and not P. So I want you to actually give that, right? Like, this is the last time I'm going to ask it. But yeah, I mean, you're just losing because you haven't adequately motivated any of your burdens, right? When you make a positive claim, you don't then therefore get to say, oh, well, I'm not going to give an argument for that claim when the interlocutor brings it into question, right? You have to actually motivate your claims. Any claim that you've asked me to motivate on the table, I have motivated it, Tony. And what you have done is not motivated any of your claims, right? If we ask ourselves, how many burdens have you fulfilled? It's 0. Hence why you're losing the debate, right?
Again, I don't know why you keep stipulating that I have a burden. Again, now if you're going to stipulate that I have some kind of burden to explain basic things, right? So again, remember, asking the question or just even speaking already allows me to make further presuppositions in a modal ontological sense, right? If you are speaking, it is necessary that you have vocal cords. I can presuppose that. If you are speaking coherently or things with structure and form, I can presuppose that you are speaking language or you have language. Or therefore, if you have language, I can presuppose that you have some measure of logical or critical thinking or reasonable thinking, right? So just even answering or speaking or even gauging whatsoever allows me to make a couple of necessary presuppositions. That's transcendentalism, right? For you to deny that would just have to say that, hey, you don't even know, you can't even prove that you're even talking to somebody right now. So again, another assumption that you made that was unjustifiable is that when you first came up here, first I told you, I said I can show you or give you some kind of proof, right, that God exists either in 6 or 7 questions and or statements, because the questions can just be posited as a statement. Because what are questions? Questions are often, some can be considered a command depending on how they're posited. So a command can just be a stipulation or something put forth. So I can either just remove the question mark and just make the statement, in which case you can either just accept or deny each question, which you could have done, which you just didn't want to do. Right. So again, that's one blunder right there that you made, and the next blunder that you made is that you are presupposing some kind of format that you would like, which is why you're stipulating that I have some kind of burden, which I don't. Right? Because then if you're going to presuppose that I have some, or assume that I have some obligation to fulfill a format that you want, right? Well, then that's on you. That's a wrongful assumption that you made. And then number 2, it was told from the very beginning that there would be 6 or 7 questions and or statements. So that was another mistake.
Bro, this is embarrassing. So he just told me that questions can be commands. Like, are we serious? This is just embarrassing, right? Like listen, questions are interrogative, right? They ask for information. Commands tell people to do something. It's trivially the case that there's a relevant distinction between questions and commands. That's a embarrassing blunder on your end. Now, you made the claim, right? Like, obviously you made the claim that you're giving an argument. Then you provided a series of questions. All that's in question here is just, can questions serve as arguments, right? Can a series of questions serve as an argument? I don't hold that position, right? Because I deny the type of interrogative type of theories of argumentation where you're asking for an answer and then you build inferences based off that answer. This is just the Socratic method, which is denied, right? I take it that you have no clue what you're talking about. If I'm speaking, I necessarily have vocal cords. I don't even take that to be true. But what are you talking about? Obviously, I take it that AI systems or whatever can speak. So any type of modal ontological inference you just made there is just also absurd. You also said if you have language, you have some measure of critical thinking. I deny that as well. I take it that you can have, non-functional cognitive faculties and still use language. But yeah, you presuppose that logic exists. You didn't give an argument that logic exists. You said there's a contradiction. You didn't show that there's a contradiction. You said that dialectism is necessarily false. You didn't show me how dialectism was necessarily false. You didn't motivate the transcendentalism that you're talking about. You talked about how I presuppose solipsism. You didn't explain how I was presupposing solipsism or that I was reduced down to solipsism. And I gave you the relevant distinction between the 2 categories, and you didn't respond to that. You didn't motivate principle, proportion, and causality.
Okay, great. So again, number 1, I said
closing statement, or you just want to respond first?
Yeah, I'll just respond real quick. So number 1, I didn't. Again, I said questions. Yes, I said questions can be commands depending on how they're put forward. I didn't say they are exclusively commands. So if I said, let's say to like a little toddler or this and that, hey, young man, do you want to close that lid? Right? He might pick up that I'm telling him to do something. Hence a command because of the context clues of the situation. So I said that questions can be put as a command. I'm saying they're exclusively a command. So that was a blunder on your part, right? That's what semantics is. It's context, sense, reference, use. And the context clues tell you how it's being. That's semantics 101, bro. And then number 2, again, when you're just talking about like me presupposing like saying I said the burden of proof. Excuse me. We talk about dialetheism, right? I said that you haven't really proved that is true, and you haven't. And I don't even understand why that would even be my burden of proof to prove that it is false. Right? Again, the whole point was to put forth the questions. The point was, I stipulated from the get-go, was for you to answer them. You did not want to answer them, and then of course you try to change the dialectic and then burden shift to me as if I had one, again saying that I presupposed or made assumptions and stuff like that, which, here's the thing, yes, I am justified in making the presuppositions given the exchange that occurred. Right? Every exchange invokes a response or action, and given that, the presuppositions are justified. Right? Now, if I'm talking about like, do you want to just deny or do you want to make me just? Well, then again, that's what I'm saying. Then we're just gonna. just gonna have to revert you. I'm gonna sick your own Cartesian demon on you, and you're gonna have to revert to the regresses of your own mind, aka solipsism.
Bro, this guy has no clue what he's talking about. I just explained to him why he had about, 20 burdens. He didn't respond. He only responded to one of the burdens. He said he doesn't see how it's his burden, so I'm going to explain how it's your burden. If you're a logical realist, then you're literally just saying dialectism is necessarily false, because it's the case that contradictions can't obtain in the actual world, right? Like, this is just trivial. This is my closing, though. I want to explain to you guys how he just didn't meet any of his burdens. There was like 20 burdens on the table that he didn't fulfill. And yeah, I mean, he begged the question the entire time. What was in question was whether or not there's a relevant distinction between option 1 and 4, which I already gave him. And all he did was just say, oh, well, no, there isn't, right? Which is just, we can just do that ad infinitum and we're not going to get anywhere. He didn't respond to the arothetic talk. Like, I already put into question whether or not the quote-unquote argument he was giving was actually an argument, and he didn't respond. And he just made some false inferences. Questions trivially aren't commands, because commands have different purposes. A question can function as a command, right? But it just isn't a command, because questions ask for information, right? And a command tells someone to do something in this sense, right? You can have something that's grammatically a question, but its purpose is to request that someone close the door. But that's still a question. If I say, could you close the door? And there's a question mark right there. It's still a question, right? But its purpose is to request that someone close the door, right? Whereas if I say close the door, right, obviously that's just going to be a command, right? There's just a grammatical distinction there, and he has no clue what he's talking about, right? The difference is between form and function, right? Like, you can take a sentence, it can be grammatically a question while functioning as a request, but that's not the same as saying it's a command, right? He just has no clue what he's talking about. And yeah, I mean, I think we can conclude here. If we do like a burden counter, there was like 30 burdens. And yeah, I mean, I'm out of here, man.